Well, welcome back, everybody. We are now going to begin in our study in the book of Genesis. We are beginning in Genesis, or chapter 9, continuing in Genesis chapter 19. This is a significant chapter in our study. There's a lot going on in this chapter, and I hope that you can kind of see this like a movie in the adventures of Abraham, because that's really, in a lot of ways, what's going on here. I want to remind you in our chapter overview what's going on, what happened in chapter 18. If you remember in chapter 18, the Lord visits with Abraham. Remember, he sees three men outside, and Abraham begins this Middle Eastern hospitality, as we call it. And he begins to give them a meal and to make sure they're rested. And he's running here and running everywhere. And it's quite a job for an older guy like this. You know, he's running everywhere. And we learned that he says, my Lord, in chapter 18. He's referring to, it means the word Adonai. It's a very generic term that is a show of respect. But down through the story, one of the angels then turned to him, one of the men turned to him, who is probably what we talked about last week, a theophany, an appearance of God in flesh form. And he says, is anything too hard for the Lord? I forgot to mention this last week, so I want to say it now. That word Lord is different than the word Adonai in Hebrew. It's the word Yahweh. And at that point, Abraham knew these men were representatives, anyway, of the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Yahweh himself. And so remember, he mentions to Abraham that he's going to go and check on Sodom to see if all the things are true. And immediately the story jumps to Abraham saying, would you not destroy it for 50 people? Abraham says that even before the Lord says, I'm going to destroy it. And he says, yes, for the sake of 50, I'll not destroy it. And remember, we have the first Jew, right? Abraham's the first Jew, already having that bartering in his blood, that business mentality. He knew there wasn't 50, but he started at what he thought was maybe a reasonable number. And he starts bartering. Don't get mad at me, but what about 45? Please be patient. What about 40? Well, would you be upset if I asked for 30? He gets them all the way down to 10, thinking, okay, well, I've got my nephew there, his wife, and well, they've got at least 4 kids we know of in Scripture, and they're married. We might get to 10. Lord says, I won't destroy it for the sake of 10. Abraham prays that the Lord, and he begins to intercede on behalf of his family in Sodom. That's where our story picks up, is now we're going to see this, the story progress into these men, these angels we know, going over and checking out Sodom for themselves. Here's our chapter overview. In chapter 18, the reader discovered that the Lord appeared unto Abraham and reaffirmed his promise for a child with Sarah. The Lord God also would visit Sodom for himself. While in Sodom, he meets with Lot at his house and is nearly attacked by the men of Sodom. The 2 angels warn Lot, his wife, and 2 daughters, but they don't listen. The angels forcibly remove the family moments before Sodom is destroyed. After, in Zoar, Lot's 2 daughters take advantage of him to preserve his lineage. This is the tale of the power of culture versus family, and God's holiness versus compromising with sin. There's a very simple outline we're going to look at, which is also in your handout. Verses 1 through 11 will be our first focus. The 2 angels experience the depravity of Sodom. This moves on to 12 through 22. The angels forcibly remove Lot, his wife, and 2 daughters. Then we're going to see the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And then finally we see in the last 9 verses, Lot's 2 daughters take advantage of their father. Very, very interesting passage. Let's go ahead and dive in and see what the Word of God says this morning. Now the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening. Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them. He bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Hear now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and spend the night. Wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way. And they said, No, but we'll spend the night in the open square. Let's think about a few things that are being said already. In verse number 1, we see that the 2 angels, now wait a second, What happened to the other angel? In chapter 18, there was 3 angels, and now we see 2. It seems to me that these are the messengers of God. They are representatives of God. I think that theophany that we saw in chapter 18 is no longer present. But these 2 angels, angel means messengers, they've already got their marching orders from the Lord, and they are now there to warn Lot's family. Apparently, what must have happened in the story is that the Lord already knew. Remember we talked about last week these 2 options. Does the Lord already know, or is he speaking in terms of, human terms? I'll go down and see for myself. Is this kind of like what he said to Adam? He said, Adam, where are you? Did the Lord know where Adam was when he asked that? Of course. Who told you you were naked? The Lord knew these questions before. Was he talking like that in chapter 18? I'm going to go down now to see if these things are so. He says things like that also to Abraham. When Abraham is willing to offer his son Isaac, he says, now I know your faith. Did he not know before? These are interesting questions, but it seems like in this story, there was 3. One was the Lord himself. Apparently, he'd either already gone to Sodom to see for himself, or he already knew. Either way, we're down to 2 angels. And these 2 angels apparently are the messengers of God. I want you to notice a couple things in our story here because I think these are significant things. One is, we notice we're down to 2 angels. The other thing is, Lot was sitting in, and this is an important phrase, in the gate of Sodom. The gate of Sodom. In the Bible, when we refer to somebody being in the gate of a city, it's referring to, this is the best way you can think, so simple, think of it like this. When you go into a country and you go through customs, think of that as the gate of a city, customs. It's the gatekeeper, we could say. It's deciding who will go in and who will be let out. Also, what is your business here? How long do you plan on staying? Do you notice how he rose to meet them? He bowed himself. Remember, this is the same Lot that's separated from Abraham. And when Abraham gave him the choice, he said, well, where do you want to go? Remember, Lot lifted up his eyes and he looked over the Jordan River and he thought, wow, that is a beautiful place. Remember? And he set up his tent toward Sodom. He observed it with his eyes and he began to want what his eyes saw. Not only that, but Lot then went to Sodom and became a resident of Sodom. And now we observe in verse number 1, not only is he a resident of Sodom, but also Lot is a gatekeeper at Sodom. He is one of the actual judges or leadership. He's in a leadership role now in Sodom. In the gate means not, we think of a gate as just, something on a hinge that allows you to get out. But in the gate was a reference that meant he was in the front office. He was one of the men that made the decisions in Sodom. So now his entire family is wrapped up in the culture of Sodom, and Lot has become a sort of leader in Sodom as well. And we're going to see in the story that you may want to tell your family about godly values. But listen, if you're going to lead your family into Sodom, it may not be so easy to lead your children out of Sodom. This is a story about godly desires versus an ungodly culture. And this is certainly an ungodly culture. Notice also he bows himself down to the ground. We can see this again with the story of mirroring a little bit of what Abraham was doing in Genesis 18, or this Middle Eastern culture. That's going to come into play in the story as well. Also in number 2, I want you to notice, Lot said, here now, my lords, please turn to your servant's house and spend the night. He's trying to get these 2 angels, he sees them as just regular men. He's trying to get them to quickly get into his house. Now, why do you think that is? So make this into a movie in your mind so it makes sense to you. There's 2 men that come, and apparently they were attractive men. Apparently. You're going to see that in a second. And Lot said, hey, I'm so glad you're here. I'll tell you what. I don't know you, but why don't you get in my house as fast as you can? We can make sure we get your feet washed and take care of you. And then here, I'll tell you what. Now, after that, then you know what? You can rise up early and can you get out of here? Do you see that built into verse number 2? I'm going to let you into my house. We'll take care of you. Then I'll tell you what. Before the sun comes up, you guys need to vamoose. That's what's going on here. Now, let me show you a couple of verses here. I don't have this on your handout, but let me just turn, if you can, in your Bible to Proverbs chapter 31. Let's talk about this gate idea for just a moment. Proverbs 31 and verse 23. Just want to show you this theming. Proverbs 31:23, how it's used in other parts of the Bible. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. So here we see in Proverbs that this idea of being in the gate of a city is also sitting with those that are in authority. 2 Kings 7, you can read the chapter. The whole chapter has this idea in and out of being in the gate is also having to do with this. But let me show you one place very specifically. Ruth chapter 4 and verses 1 through 8. In Ruth chapter 4 and verses 1 through 8. And I want to show you this specifically because this will tie into a couple parts of our story. Ruth chapter 4 and verses 1 through 8. Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Come aside, friend, sit down here." So he came aside and sat down. He took 10 men of the elders of the city and sat down here. He said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Verse 3. Then he said to the close relative, "Naomi, who has come back from my country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to her brother Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me that I may know. For there's no one but you to redeem it, and I am next of you." And he said, "I will redeem it." What we have going on here is he's trying to understand what they want to do with some land. Context doesn't matter so much for our story. What I want you to see is when Boaz wanted to have a land contract signed, you see where he went. He sat down the elders at the gate of the city. That's all I want you to see. Let's head back over to Genesis. So here we see Lot has now found himself in the gate of the city. Let's move on. Verse 3. But he insisted strongly. So they, oh, by the way, let me go back to verse 2. The men, he said, "Why don't you get into my house? We'll get you some breakfast that you guys can get on your way early in the morning." He said, "No, but we're going to spend the night in the open square. Hey, thanks for the offer, but you know what? We'd rather smell the fresh air. We want to go to the common place. We want to go in the middle of the city. We want to spend the night in the local park. That's where we'd rather be." You see what they're doing? They're pushing the culture. And Lot's like, "You can't do that." So Lot knew they were not going to be safe spending the night in the open square. Verse 3. But he, that is Lot, insisted strongly. So they turned into him to enter his house. Then he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Now before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them carnally." Now this is in the same way when we read this euphemism where Adam knew Eve, his wife, and they brought forth a child. This is a terrifying scene. I wanted to point out just a couple of things in this, and that is that the men of the city were both old and young. And it says in this text that it was all the people of the city. I also want to point out something so that that we make sure that we say the right thing when we're talking to others about this situation. Because don't you agree that Sodom, the story of Sodom, gets thrown around a lot today? So let's make sure that we're accurate about what's actually happening here. What I'm about to tell you does not in any way minimize the sin, that's right, the sin of homosexuality. I'm not minimizing it. I think it is a sin. I think lying is a sin, and I think gluttony is a sin. Homosexuality is a sin, and I'm not minimizing it, full stop. But there's a lot more going on in this story than there are people that are homosexuals in Sodom. This is a culture of rape. This is a culture of power over other people. These men didn't just simply ask them out on a date. They wanted to force their way in and force themselves on them. It says the whole city was like this. It was the culture of the city. So they wanted to know them, both old and young, all the people. They surrounded the house like an angry mob in power and control over the men sexually. Yes, homosexuality is a sin, but please don't say when you see two people that are homosexuals today and say, this is just like Sodom and Gomorrah. It's not. Culturally, it's very different. In the Bible, it was forced rape culture, totally accepted on anybody they wanted, both old and young, all the people. So please make sure that we're speaking in this correctly in the biblical terms. Verses 6 through 8. So Lot, can you see this in your mind? These two men finally made it into the house. These are angels. The men of the city, man, they're surrounding the house. The mob, they can hear the mob. Can you imagine? Lot's heart is beating as he looks outside and he can hear the mob outside. So Lot went out to them through the doorway and shut the door behind him. Can you see it in your mind? Opens the door, closes it real quickly. Hey guys, what do you guys want? He knows what they want. Shut the door as quick as he could. And he said, guys, verse 7, please do not do so wickedly. Don't be so wicked. Can you take a night off? Please don't do this. Go back to your houses. And then he says this insane verse. Let me read the verse, then we'll talk about it. He says, listen, see now, I have two daughters who have not known a man. Please, let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you wish. Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof. Lot to unpack here. All right, let's talk through this. We need to talk through this one. Why on earth would any father say what Lot said? There's a lot of reasons. Let's talk through it. First of all, I want you to notice this idea of having two daughters who have not known a man. He said, please let me bring them out to you. There was a Middle Eastern culture. And you're going to say, Ken, this does not excuse that. I know, but let me just try to explain. There's a Middle Eastern culture that said, if you came under my roof, I'm obligated to give my life to you. That's just the Middle Eastern culture. The hospitality we saw of Abraham in Genesis chapter 18, we also see it here in Genesis 19. And you're saying, yeah, but man, I don't care about culture when it comes to my daughters. I agree with you. Now here's the statement. Please understand the greatness of God in what I'm about to say. Do you know why every single one of us are appalled by this verse? Because we are reading it, please get this, through the lens of 2,000 years of influence of Christianity. Women were not valued in this culture. They weren't. When we're reading through the Bible, all the timelines, all the genealogy, everything went through the man's line. Everything. The women weren't valued in this culture. And by the way, on top of all this, they worked harder than the men. They were the ones in the field. They were the ones carrying. They were doing all the heavy lifting. You say, well, that's not fair. This is my point. It was Jesus Christ of Nazareth who put value on women. And we are reading this through 2,000 years of influence of Christianity, and we can't fathom. They would have got this right away. They said, oh, well, yeah, protect the men. I mean, it's just your daughters, and these guys are in your house. So you need to understand that you have been educated, indoctrinated by the love of Jesus Christ towards every single person on the planet. This culture did not have that. It was Jesus alone who changed this culture into protecting everybody, and everybody has value in him. Remember, we learned the Apostle Paul make arguments like, there's no more Jew or Gentile in Christ. Remember one of those distinctions? No more what? Male or female. This is a new idea. We take it for granted. And by the way, on top of that, we learn when I officiate weddings, which I've got another one coming up here in a little while. I get to do another wedding. When there's another wedding coming up. But you know what I'm going to talk about in that wedding? That there's going to be a picture of Jesus and the church. And the wife is to love her husband as the church loves Jesus. But the husband is supposed to be so loving to his wife that he's willing to give his life for her as Jesus gave his life for the church. Game changer. Game changer. So if you're a woman here this morning, there's another reason to love Jesus. He's changed every culture on the planet. Now, if we hear about a culture that anywhere near resembles this, we think that is despicable, that they would treat anybody that way. But we have to see it through the lens of Middle Eastern eyes at this time period. Verses 9 through 11. And they said, stand back. Then they said, this one, oh, by the way, can I just focus on something real quick? We may not get done with this morning. That's okay. I knew it might be a two-parter. Let me just say this too. I also want to show you this. Lot says, do nothing to these men since this, what? How you're acting right now. This is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof. The way you're acting right, you need to leave right now. Why? Because this is the reason they're here. You have no idea what you guys are doing. You need to leave now. Oh, this gets interesting. Look at verses 9 through 11. And they said, stand back. Then they said, this one came in to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. Let me break this down for you here. This is what they're saying. This is the mob. The mob says, stand back to Lot. Then they said, this one, speaking of Lot, he came in to stay here. Now, what are they referring to? Abraham says, Lot, we can't go on like this. You choose one way, I'll choose the other. And Lot goes, man, that's a beautiful area there by the Jordan River. I'm going to go that way. And so as a traveler, Lot goes there. That's what they're talking about. Man, you just got here. You just got here. Who do you think you are? You're just one who came in here and to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. Now you know why it took so long to talk to you about in the gate. Lot was in the gate of Sodom. He was in a position of authority at Sodom. So very literally, they're correct. He keeps acting like a judge. He's the gatekeeper of the city. They're like, we're tired of you, man. You're new here. We've been here a long time. You joined our culture. This is what we do. And now you're trying to keep us from what we do? Who are you acting like a judge? You're a traveler yourself. Do you see that here? So they pressed hard against the man Lot and came to nearly break down the door. Get out of our way! But the men, that is in verse number 10, the two angels, reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. Do you see the imagery? So these guys the mob's trying to break the door down. The angels grab Lot, pull him back, and they slam the door shut. But they got a little advantage here because look at what happens next. And they, that is the two angels, struck the men, that is the mob, who were at the doorway of the house with blindness. Oh, that's not fair. They have these powers from the Lord. The two angels struck the mob with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary trying to find the door. They got exhausted. They couldn't find the door anymore because they were blind. But there's one part of your handout I want you to notice as we move on, and that is this. Notice that the men admit their actions were wicked. You say, when did they do that? Notice what it says here in verse number 9. I think this is very significant. It says in verse number 9, you keep acting as a judge. Now, we will deal worse with you than with them. They knew they were acting in a wicked way, and they knew they were acting in a bad, worse way. Well, the superlative is off, but you see what I'm saying. We're acting bad towards him and we'll deal worse with you. They admit their wickedness. They weren't even trying to hide that part of it. But the two angels easily overpower them. Now verses 12 through 22 is the angels forcibly remove Lot, his wife, and two daughters. Verses 12 and 13. Then the men said to Lot, have you anyone else here? Son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, whomever you have in the city, take them out of this place. Now here's what we do know. We do know that Lot had his wife, and we do know there was at least two daughters married and at least two that weren't. Two were in the house still, and two, because they say sons-in-law, so we know it's a plurality. At least two. So he's got at least four kids. Two are married, two daughters are married, and two aren't, and his wife. So that's what we know. And these two angels are like, look us in the eyes, dude. Tell them all to get out. We will destroy this place because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Now, I want to take just a moment and go over to 2 Peter chapter 2, because Peter gives us a divine commentary on this. If you have an opportunity to choose the Bible to interpret the Bible over another commentary, always choose the Bible. It's a divine commentary from the Lord. Here we have the Apostle Peter in 2 Peter chapter 2 giving us a commentary on this. I want you to see a couple of things out of this passage in 2 Peter chapter number 2, beginning in verse number 4. Peter writes, for if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into everlasting chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world of the ungodly. And notice, now that you know more about Genesis, do you see the order he's going through chronologically? Verse number 6, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example of those who afterward would live ungodly, and delivered righteous Lot. Whoa. Peter, the Apostle Peter, called these actions righteous. You can see Lot's struggle, can't you? He's against the mob culture of this forcible action. He's against it. Dude, why are you there? Right? Why are you raising your family here? It's kind of easy to move into Sodom. It's difficult to talk everybody out of leaving, though. Why are you there? Peter says he's righteous. This is a giant story, really, about the power. Please get this. It's really the point of the whole thing. This is really a study on the power of intercessory prayer. This is the power of intercession. Standing in the gap for someone else. If you remember in Genesis 18, who's praying in Genesis 18? Abraham. Lord, would you not destroy them for this? Lord, would you not destroy it for my nephew is there. If you think about it, one way to summarize the story of Abraham leaves, ... Abraham leaves Ur of the Chaldees. Abraham leaves Babylon. Abraham leaves Lot. Abraham leaves Ishmael. It's all, his whole journey is about just seeing things he loves and the loved ones just go away. Let's go back to 2 Peter. He says in verse number 7, and delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds. Then the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptation and to reserve the unjust under punishment for the day of judgment, and especially those who walk according to the flesh in the lust of uncleanness and despise authority. They are presumptuous, self-willed. They are not afraid to speak evil of dignitaries. Whereas angels, this is in reference to the two men we're reading about, whereas angels who are greater in power than the mob, power and might, do not bring a reviling accusation against them before the Lord. Why? Because the Lord went and saw for himself. They don't need to do that. But it was the mob that was okay with speaking evil of Lot. And so now we have righteous Lot, according to this. Now you say, how is he considered righteous? He's living in this culture. A lot of this has to do with, in my opinion, of Lot being under the umbrella protection and covenantal structure of Abraham. Abraham is praying for Lot. It's the power of a father praying over their children. It's the power of you praying over your grandchildren. Lord, cover them. How many hours my parents have spent praying for me. What harm they've protected me from that I'm not even aware of. Oh, we can have so much power in the lives of others by interceding on their behalf. Lot was blessed beyond measure because of the faith and obedience of Abraham. So much so that he's counted as one of the righteous in the middle of a filthy environment, culturally speaking. So we can study a little bit more of that. You can notice even in verse 12, Peter refers to these people, the mob. These are like natural brute beasts made to be caught and destroyed, speak evil of the things they do not understand, will utterly perish in their own corruption. They're in other words, this mob mentality outside the door of Lot's house, they're going on instinct. They're like animals. And there's no thought of righteousness at all in their mind. Now, can you see now why the Lord caused destruction on Sodom and Gomorrah? By the way, let me mention an angle you may not see right away reading the story. Remembering the bartering process from Abraham? 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. By the way, was there 10? There wasn't 10. How do I know that? Because the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So there wasn't 10. That means it was a number less than 10. What was the number? Maybe 1, if we're counting Lot. We're going to find that out in just towards the end of this chapter. Might have been 1. But here's the mercy part that you might not see. But the Lord still sends his messengers, these 2 angels, and he went and found the one, Lot, and he said, tell your sons-in-law, tell all your daughters, tell your wife, tell your 2 daughters here, we got to go. So the Lord did a compromise kind of idea that Abraham didn't even pray for. Abraham should have followed it up and said something like, Lord, if there's not 10, would you go and warn the ones that are there so they have an opportunity to leave before you destroy it? Abraham didn't add that part. But the Lord in his mercy still went and still met with Lot and still gave a warning and said, leave now, final warning if you want to live. So you got to kind of read between the lines here. Let's head back over to Genesis 19. He said, get out, the Lord's going to destroy it. Verse 14, so Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law and who had married his daughters. How many? At least 2. And said, get up out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city. Oh, yes, sir. Thank you for saving our lives. Is that the response? The response is, but his sons-in-law, they thought he was joking. What kind of a weird, twisted relationship? Are you kidding? Really? Hey, Dad, this sounds so... Do you hear yourself? Is this one of your religious talks? I'm sure Lot had probably warned them about the culture before. And now he comes running down. He says, guys, the Lord sent messengers to me. Get out now. He's destroying the city. And they're like, oh, really? Okay, yeah, we'll go out because God talked to you. Man, this guy. They did not listen to him. Remember the story of the parable of the rich man and Lazarus? The one come back from the dead, they'll not believe it. He warned them. They still didn't leave. Seemed to be joking. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry. We're the next morning. I would have been out of there already, way before the sun comes. Now the sun is coming. The angels are like, tick-tock, y'all. That's how angels sound. Tick-tock, y'all. All right. He says, arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city. And look at these words. And while he lingered, just taking his time, the angels have had it. We are out of time. We've been talking about this all night. I just gave you a warning, so here's what we're going to do. The angels took hold of his hand. The men took hold of his hand, took hold of his wife's hand, took the hands of the two daughters, and the Lord, being merciful to him, they brought him out and set him outside the city. And as someone pointed out to me just before we started, we're maximized here, right? 2 men, 2 hands. Lot, his wife, other guy, other angel, 2 daughters. We are going right now. They brought him outside the city. So it came to pass when they had brought them outside that he said, escape for your life. Do not look behind, nor stay anywhere in the plain. But here's what you should do. Escape to the mountains lest you be destroyed. You think by this point they would be saying, thank you so much for ministering to us. We know we were dragging our feet. You guys just saved our lives. Where do you want us to go? How many of you would say, I will do whatever the Lord tells me to do at this point? I mean, mountains, great. You tell me. So they said, we just saved your life. The Lord wants you guys to go to those mountains right there. You 4 need to go to those mountains right there. Here's what Lot says. You know, I'm not really an outdoorsman. I'm not really a mountaineer. Please no, my lords. Indeed, now your servant has found favor in your sight. Obviously, I found favor in your sight. I mean, look how much you're helping us. Obviously, I found favor. You agree with that? I found favor in your sight? Okay, here's what we're going to do. And you've increased your mercy, which you have shown me by saving my life. But here's where I draw the line, guys. Listen, I can't escape to the mountains. That I can't do. Because, some evil might overtake me and I'll die. I mean, remember that old car commercial? Like a rock. How dense do you have to be? You're brought outside. Your life is saved. Your wife is saved. Your daughters are saved. The Lord wants you to go over the mountains. I don't do mountains. But let's make a little bit of a plan here. You see that little city over there? I know the Lord is destroying I know he's destroying all the cities in the area. But you see that little city over there? It's near enough to flee to. And it's just a little one. It's just a little one. So please let me escape there. Is it not a little? Am I wrong? Is it not a little one? It's just a little city. Remember our theming we went over last hour of the mountain theme and the city theme? City of God, city of man. And we see in the book of Hebrews that please get this, we were just talking about this. In the city of God, we see this idea of the heavenly Jerusalem coming down. It says in Hebrews that Abraham knew he was a stranger in the land, but he was looking for a city not made by hands, whose founder and builder is from the heavens. I just want to go to this. It's just a little one. I mean, if Sodom is a big city with big sin, then at the most, this little city is little sin. At the most, little sin. I'm not a mountain guy. I mean, there's bears there. I could twist my ankle. I mean, I'll probably die. If I obey the Lord to go to the mountains, I will probably die. This is just a little city. And he said to him, verse 21, see, I have found favor you concerning this thing, and in that I will not overthrow this city for which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore, the name of the city was called Insignificant. That is what Zoar means. It means little. Isn't that just a little city? Okay, go to little city. The sun had risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. That is literally what that word means. The Lord would have protected Lot and his family in the mountains, but their faith was too small, so they felt more comfortable near civilization. Let's see how far we can get here. The Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So he overthrew those cities, all the plain. Remember he said, don't stop, not even in the plain. He overthrew the cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the city, and what grew on the ground. That'll be important in a moment. Verse 26, but his wife, that is Lot's wife, she looked back. And notice two very important words. Behind him. and she became a pillar of salt. I want to talk to you real quick in the last 5 minutes we have. There's two words. I'll build on this another time. We don't have the time. But there's two important phrases I want to teach us about. We'll build on this. One is embedded theology, and one is deliberate theology. Embedded theology versus deliberate theology. Embedded theology is theology you catch along the way in your life without really knowing it. You catch some theology through songs you sing, or through somebody teaching you, or through a flannel graph you've seen. That's embedded. It's embedded in you. You don't know how you have it. You just were taught it. You caught it along the way in life. Embedded theology. Deliberate theology is something that you've studied. It's personal to you. You were careful. You were meticulous. It's deliberately done through you. Embedded theology versus deliberate theology. When I was a little kid, I saw a flannel graph of this story, and it showed Lot sitting in a carriage being taken away by a horse, and Lot was in the driver's seat, like, Pa Ingalls, and his wife was next to him in the flannel graph. You know what a flannel graph is, right? I think the best teaching tool ever. I'd totally use one today. Those are awesome. I love flannel graphs. But the flannel graph showed them in this horse-drawn carriage, and it had Lot there and his wife next to him, and it shows her starting to look around like that, and then she turns into salt. And that's kind of how I always had it in my mind. When I was going over this, I was like, oh, it doesn't say anything about that. So it was embedded in me that was in the passage, but it's not. Let me give you what I think is happening here, and then you can have fun studying it on your own. I think what's happening here is that the angel said, get out of the city. Don't even stand in the plain, because the Lord will destroy all of this. Now, this area, south end of the Dead Sea, is covered with sulfur even today. But the sulfur that's there today is all burned up. What it seems like to me is that Sodom literally was built on, it was like soaking a terry cloth towel with gasoline and building a city on top. The unburned sulfur there, all it needed was an electrical charge, and it would have just gone up. And this would have carried all the surrounding areas into the plain. What I think is happening here is that when the angels took them the outside of the city, said, go to the mountains. Okay, we want to go to the small city. Okay, fine, go to the city. Get out of here. Notice these two very important words. It says, but his wife looked back behind him. In other words, in the Hebrew here, it's talking about her being behind the group. She lagged behind. See, I always thought she just was sitting next to Lot and then went like this, and God said, aha, caught you. You looked. I told you not to look. Salt. That's how I've always kind of interpreted the story. I think what's actually happening here, this is my opinion, is I think she actually lagged behind, understandably. Her house, her children are there. I think she lags behind. She's standing in the plain. This is all a ticking time bomb. Perhaps the Lord sends down the electrical charge, the lightning, whatever it is, and ignites that sulfur, and the city explodes. The word brimstone is like an older word that means sulfur. So the Lord is just hailing down this fire from heaven. The fact of the matter is she's encapsulated in this sulfur, and the term the Bible uses for that is it's a pillar of sulfur, a pillar of salt. So I think the embedded theology is that she's right next to her husband and looks back real quick, and God says, I saw that. When in reality, this was just a physical response. She was too close to the destruction of the city. That's my take. You can read it and come up with your own, but I believe that's what it's saying. Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. Now our scene now shifts to Abraham. He's looking over. Abraham doesn't have Wi-Fi at this point. He doesn't have any cellular data. He's not on 5G, okay? Abraham doesn't have a clue what happened. Abraham in the morning wakes up and he sees the smoke rising from Sodom. He has no idea who got out. He doesn't know what happened. He looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the plain. He saw and behold the smoke of the land, which went up like the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out in the midst of the overthrow, and he overthrew the cities in which Lot had dwelt. A couple of quick thoughts on here. One is I want to mention that if you are so inclined, you can go down a nice rabbit hole with this online. There's an archaeologist by the name of Ron Wyatt. I have the website on your paper there if you want to go to it. Ron Wyatt claims to have found, he has passed away now, but he claims to have found the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and has filmed them and located them and all of that. And he's tested the sulfur there. Amazing stuff. I'm convinced that he found it, but I'll let you go ahead and decide that. But also I want to point out, lastly, in our handout there, God was faithful to Abraham. This intercession is a powerful tool in the Christian's arsenal. If you'd be gracious enough, we'll just finish this last point and be done. I know our time is coming to an end. Let's read through this quickly and make a quick application. Then Lot went up out of Zoar, that is the insignificant city. He dwelt in the mountains, and his 2 daughters were with him. For he was afraid to dwell in Zoar. He and his 2 daughters dwelt in a cave. So they wanted to go to this little city. They got there. They're too scared to go in. They're like, let's just stay in this cave. The mountain probably would have been best. That was God's first choice. So they're dwelling in a cave. So the 2 daughters are having a conversation. The firstborn says to the younger, you know, our dad, our father, he's pretty old. And we're sitting in a cave. Now, as far as they know, the whole world just ended. They just saw Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding areas go up in fire. And they said, there's no man on the earth to come into us, as is the custom of all the earth. I don't know if this was hyperbole on their part or if they thought there was no men left but dad. Whatever the case was, they shouldn't have been in the cave. They should have been in the mountains. And these 2 girls are talking. They're not bringing their dad in on this. This is what their plan is. Verse 32. Come, let us make our father drink wine. We will lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father. Oh, what a noble cause, right? Trying to keep the lineage of the father going. Let's get dad drunk. You can bring your kids into Sodom. Can't always get them out. These 2 were forcibly removed by the angels, but they sure had that culture stuck in their head, didn't they? In their heart. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went and lay with her father. You say, what did Lot think about this? He did not know when she lay down nor when she arose. No idea. It happened on the next day that the firstborn said to the younger, indeed, I lay with my father last night. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. And you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father. Your turn. Verse 35, they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him. He did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Moses is very careful of that detail. Thus, both daughters of Lot were with child by their father. Say, why are we hearing about this horrible sin? Here's why. You ready? The firstborn, that's the oldest, she bore a son. You know what his name was called? Moab. He's the father of the Moabites to this day. The Moabites were in the day of when Moses was writing this, and they were known as being extremely wicked. That offspring was the Moabites. The younger, she also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the people of Ammon to this day, the Ammonites. You got the Moabites from the older and the Ammonites. These are 2 enemies of Israel working our way through the story. Remember where they came from. Let me give you a really quick life application here. By the way, let me go ahead and read your handout in your last point, because it's this significant here. Here we learn of the horrible beginnings of what would be the line of the Moabites from the older daughter and the Ammonites, the younger daughter. The reason that's significant is this leads the reader to one of the important people in our study following the line of Jesus to Ruth, also known as Ruth, the Moabitess. See, out of this incredibly depraved culture of the Moabites comes one out of their culture, the story of Ruth, from the Moabites, the Moabitess Ruth. And she says to Naomi famously, your people will now be my people, and your God will be my God. And Ruth is saved. Ruth changes family lines from a culture of depravity, and through humility says, whatever you have going on with you, Naomi, I'm in. Your God's now my God. Your people are my people. And through this decision, she then finds someone who's in charge of the gate of his city. Boaz. say, why is that significant? Because if you remember the end of the book of Ruth in chapter 4, Ruth married into the family of Boaz, who became the great grandfather of King David. In God's mercy and in his grace, he took this incestuous relationship and this depraved culture of the Moabites, and one showed what you could do through humility and taking advantage of the mercy and the grace of God. I mean advantage in a good way. And Ruth humbles herself and switches sides to a covenant relationship with the Almighty God. And if he could do it for Ruth, he can do it for anybody. Life application from it. Isn't there a lot? When I got to this portion in my study, I kind of started laughing, like, so much. Here's a couple thoughts. We could add to this for a long time. No matter how attractive the culture may be, it's far more important to be separated for the use of God's kingdom. Listening to his instructions are far more important than being liked or respected by the ungodly. There's a lot to Genesis 19, but it will set us up for our next story that we look at together in Genesis 20. I hope that was a blessing to you.